Okay, let's talk about something that's on pretty much everyone's mind. Soaring gas prices. It's got a lot of us wondering if switching to an electric vehicle is the ultimate escape. Well, today, we're going to break it all down. The economics, the risks, and what the future of powering your car actually looks like. Let's dive right in.
This is the big question, isn't it? You see that painful number at the pump, and you can't help but think there's got to be a better way. And on the surface, it seems like a really simple trade. You ditch the gas station for a plug in your garage. But as we're about to see, you're not just swapping fuels. You're swapping entire energy systems, and each one plays by a completely different set of rules.
So first up, let's look at the machinery cranking away behind the prices. It's not just about what you pay, it's about why you're paying it. And understanding the fundamental difference between how gasoline and electricity are priced, well, that's the key to figuring out your real exposure to those wallet-crushing price spikes.
And wow, this slide really lays it all out, doesn't it? Gasoline prices are basically on this wild roller coaster that's tied directly to the global price of crude oil, and we all know how sensitive that is to, well, just about anything happening in the world. So price shocks can happen literally overnight. Electricity, on the other hand, is totally different. It's based on this diverse mix of sources, which acts like a giant shock absorber. It makes price changes much, much slower and way more predictable.
And here's what that diversified portfolio actually looks like in the US. It's this big mix of natural gas, renewables, nuclear, and coal. Now, notice what's missing? Yeah, crude oil. It's not a major player here at all. So what that means is, even if oil prices completely double, your electricity bill isn't going to do the same. The two systems are basically decoupled.
All right, so the systems are different, we get that. But let's get to the bottom line, right? Let's follow the money and see how this big structural difference actually translates into dollars and cents when you're out there driving.
This is the big one. This is the question everybody really wants answered. We've talked theory, but what's the practical, day-to-day financial impact of picking an EV over a gas car, especially with the prices we're seeing today?
And boom, here's your answer. And the numbers? Well, they're pretty stark. On average, driving a typical gasoline car costs you about 17 cents for every mile you drive. But charging an EV at home? That plummets to around 5 cents per mile. That is a massive, massive difference. We're talking about potentially cutting your quote-unquote fuel cost by more than 2/3. And check this out. This advantage is really solid. Let's just run a little stress test. Imagine a huge, kind of crazy 30% jump in electricity prices. Even then, the cost to drive a mile only goes up to about 8 cents. That's still less than half the cost of gasoline. So that financial buffer you get, it's significant.
But this whole thing goes way deeper than just saving a few bucks at the pump. It's about a much bigger idea, gaining some real control and stability over your own personal energy needs. So let's level up this conversation from just cents per mile to the strategy of energy security.
And this right here is the golden rule. It's called energy diversification. And true energy security, it doesn't come from just picking the winning fuel. No, it comes from spreading out your options so you're not completely vulnerable if one system goes haywire. It's all about building resilience.
Think about it this way. If you only own a gas car, you're at the mercy of global oil politics. If you only own an EV, you're totally dependent on the power grid staying up and running. Neither one is perfect, right? The real hedge, the truly smart move, is to diversify. That could mean pairing an EV with solar panels on your roof to generate your own power. Or it could mean getting a plug-in hybrid, which gives you the flexibility of both electricity and gasoline. You've got a foot in both camps, so you're covered either way.
All right, speaking of solar, you know where this is going, right? We have to talk about that really popular, really appealing idea. What if we could just skip the grid and the gas station altogether and power our cars directly from the sun? Let's take a good hard look at the reality of that dream.
I mean, it's the ultimate vision of freedom, isn't it? A car that just fuels itself by sitting out in the sun all day. We see these concept cars, a few niche vehicles out there with solar roofs, but can this tech actually replace plugging in or filling up for real? Well, the reality, based on the physics of today's tech, it's a pretty hard no. The problem is just that a car's roof isn't big enough to capture a meaningful amount of energy. On a perfect, super sunny day, the absolute best you can hope for is about 6 kilometers, so less than 4 miles of extra range. Look, it's a nice little top-up, but it's not a primary fuel source, not even close. So the myth might be busted, but the dream isn't totally dead. It just looks a little different. Here's the practical way to actually drive on sunshine. First, you use your home's roof, which has a ton of surface area, to generate some serious power. Second, you store all that excess energy in a home battery. And then third, you charge your car overnight from that battery. You're effectively filling your car's tank with yesterday's sunlight. This is the strategy that actually works today.
Okay, so that's where we are today. But let's get out the crystal ball for a minute, because technology never ever sits still. What happens when the next wave of amazing tech starts to come together? Let's try and decode the car of 2040. This timeline lays out the roadmap for 3 potential game changers. Around 2027, we could see the first solid-state batteries. These are a huge deal because they're safer, they last longer, and they charge way faster. By 2030, they could hit the mass market right alongside hydrogen engines, which could give you the same range and refueling speed as gasoline. And then, by 2035, these new, super-efficient solar cells called perovskites might finally be tough enough to basically wrap a whole car in.
So, let's put it all together. Imagine a car with a super safe, fast-charging solid-state battery, plus a hydrogen engine for ultimate range and flexibility, all wrapped in a solar skin that's constantly topping up the battery. This is the kind of vehicle that could realistically show up sometime between 2035 and 2040. It's pretty much the potential endgame for having personal energy security on wheels.
And that brings us to our final thought. A car like that sounds incredible, right? It sounds like it solves all the problems we've talked about today. Our dependence on oil, our reliance on the grid. But here's the thing about progress. Every solution creates a brand new puzzle. We solve one set of challenges and we create new ones. Maybe they'll be about sourcing new materials for batteries, or building out a hydrogen network, or maybe something we can't even imagine yet. The quest for true energy security, it never really ends.